Thank you. All right, I would like to call to order the January 30th, 2023 Board Work Session and Special Meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I would like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those who are viewing remotely. The board held an executive session on January 23rd regarding Title IX negotiations and personnel. There was an additional executive session prior to this meeting regarding personnel. Board members, with the agenda before you, are there any changes? Okay, I would now like to call on the board secretary for a roll call.
Dr. Anderson.
Here?
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Dr. Crevecore.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Here.
All right, moving on to our first and only action item. There's a motion to approve the down select of applicants for board member vacancy as seen in attachment 3A. Board members, I'm going to open this up for discussion before accepting a motion. So given the number of applicants, what are we interested in down selecting? Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
I'm flexible.
I'm also flexible.
All right. Yeah, Amy, go ahead.
While I know it's not a small number of applicants, I think that
You okay, Amy?
certainly compatible skill sets. And so I think for full transparency with the community, it would probably be simplest to try to stick to a brief process, interview process, and hear from all the candidates.
Yeah, I definitely I had the down select in mind because we didn't know if we were going to have 53 applicants or 3 applicants. And so I feel the number that we've arrived at, they took the time to apply. I'd be fine giving them all 5 minutes just to come introduce themselves to the board so we can make a more informed decision as the board.
And there was a lot of work that went into those materials as well.
Yeah.
They didn't just, there's a lot of thought and care that went into each of the responses.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Oh, go ahead, Carlene. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I agree I think that we should let the applicants have a chance to speak to the public. And I think that in fairness of transparency, I think the public would like that also.
Well, I'll speak from the perspective of someone who applied twice for openings. So I do think that gives me a different perspective.
Sure.
The first time, I don't know how many people applied. I was not selected for an interview. I was fine with that. I mean, I'd sent in everything and I'd put the work into it, but I just did. The second time, which was the last time we had an opening, I was in fact selected for an interview. And I felt that the process was transparent. What they had done was based on the paper review. People got to vote for how many ever they felt they really wanted to hear again from. And then I was one of 4 who was selected. And it gave, speaking as I was not the successful candidate, but I felt I really got to say more than I would have. All I could have done in 5 minutes is really say what I've already said, was my thinking about it. And I would rather be able to hear a little more from people who have reached a certain threshold of people. If you think about it, whether we do it now or do it after the interviews, because there's not that much more you can get in 5 minutes, at some point we have to cut down. And doing it now gives us more opportunity to hear more and learn more before we try to do it again down to one person. So that was my thinking.
Okay. Yep.
Oh, and one other thing. The first down select was done anonymously, meaning not that the board members were anonymous, but the people were. So I don't know, the first time I didn't know whether I got lots of votes or a few votes, and the second time too. So it just said that people got X number of votes. It didn't say who the people were, if you know what I mean. It's obvious
Who
if you look
voted
at the
for which
minutes.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the only names that came up, all of them were reported in the paper, but the only names that were mentioned aloud were the ones who were at the top of the number of let's hear again froms.
Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
I guess I would just say that I personally would be happy to hear from all 10 applicants, and even if we gave them, like, we've asked, I think, people to prepare 3 to 5 minutes, and then if we had 2 or 3 minutes for a follow-up question, it would be max of 10 minutes per person. That's 100 minutes. That's an hour and 40 minutes. That doesn't seem an unreasonable amount of time to put into this process. So I would personally like to hear from all 10.
Good job on the math there.
Thanks.
Jackie, I have a question.
Oh, yeah,
So
go
I
for it.
think maybe Deb just answered my question, but I know that the email had said, at least I think it said 3 to 5 minute presentation and then follow-up questions by the board. Deb just suggested, I guess, what did you say, 2 to 3
minutes.
minutes?
Or, up to 5.
Up to 5 minutes. So anyway,
Just throwing those out.
it'd be nice if we had that, I think, decided ahead of time so that we don't get chaotic or spend, 5 hours. So just if we could sort of flesh that out ahead of time, I think would probably be good to do.
Yeah, because I also want to make sure we're being equitable and not giving an overabundance of time to one person.
Right, because we don't want to give a lot of time at the beginning, and then the last person who goes, we're tired and say, you have 1 minute. That would not be good.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, I think I agree with Amy and Carlene. I just think that in the, listening to everybody, as long as we're fair, it maximizes transparency for the presentation so the public can at least have the chance to see people do the presentation. And then if we just have some shot clock on the questions that we ask, and that we make sure that we constrain that time so that it's equitable for everybody, but everybody can have the chance to ask, like, that there can be a question asked, I'm good. And as the historically least patient person on the board, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions, or would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we do not down select and we hear from all 10 applicants on February 2nd. Is that
Thursday. Yeah.
this Thursday?
I'd second that motion.
Could we get a roll call vote then, please?
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes?
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
All right. So we'll hammer out what the limit on the shot clock, as you put it, for the questions.
You don't have to determine that right now.
Okay. We'll
Great.
get that information out to the candidates. So congratulations to all the applicants. We look forward to hearing from you on Thursday. Thank you so much for taking the time to apply. We really appreciate your interest in serving the community. Okay. Check. All right. Next, we're going to move on to information discussion items. And the first one is I'd like to call on Randy Brown to provide an update on the local economic revitalization tax assistant program.
Randy just went out.
Randy just went out.
TCC meeting. He said text him when you want him. I don't know if the next item you need him as much for. I'm guessing you probably do, Peter.
We do, because he needs to run the PowerPoint for it.
Okay.
He wasn't expecting us to be this decisive.
That's right. Let me get him.
Thank you.
Wow. All that speed and efficiency, Jackie. What's happening?
I didn't even have a cortado today.
Wow.
Thank you. All right. In my class, I would ask if anyone has a joke, but I'll refrain tonight.
Sorry.
It's all good. Thank you, thank you. So we just called information discussion on the local economic revitalization tax assistance. And I understand Mr. Ferris is here with us tonight. Mr. Ferris, would you like to join us at the podium? Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Ron Ferris. I am here representing both the Bobby Rahal Automotive Group and Ferris Land Development, which is a real estate arm of Bobby Rahal Automotive Group, and the Clare Farm. The purpose of my meeting tonight is to talk to you about ALERTA, which is a local economic revitalization tax assistance proposal. It's basically a tax abatement program. And what I would like to talk to you about is properties that are on page 2 of your handouts. There we go. And if I can, I'm going to point out. This is, you can see I-99 across the top, Shiloh Road bisecting it. You will see in the green section, divided by Shiloh Road, is a 45-acre parcel right there, and a 16-acre parcel owned by the Clare family on the east side of the street. These two parcels were rezoned in 2007 when I-99 was installed. It made great sense to rezone these two parcels commercial, being that they are now right at an interchange of I-99. But what failed to happen was the rest of the infrastructure. So these parcels have sat commercial without infrastructure since 2007. Normally, let's say you get it rezoned, because I've gone through this process before with dealerships. You build it out. Let's say it took you 5 years to build it out. Bring the utilities in, build all the buildings. That'd make it 2012. What's that telling us? Well, for 11 years, there has been no real tax collected on this parcel. Now, I am proposing to build 8 to 10 acres of it up in the top corner of, yep, right there, thank you, Randy, and build a new Honda dealership and bring our Lexus dealership from Lewistown up here also. So to build 2 dealerships. I've designed the dealerships. We've ran cost estimates, including what the real estate tax would be. The tax for just the 2 dealerships in school tax is like $100,000 a year. So we go into this, page 3. We've gone through the rezoning of it, okay? Okay, I'm proposing the 2 dealerships. Tax is $100,000 a year. What does that mean? The dealerships are roughly going to be 1/8 of the commercial land here. So if you multiplied it out, realistically, there could be $800,000 a year in school taxes generated. Now, these 2 parcels are an independent Benner, whose children and taxes come to the State College School District. But because the sewer authorities, which has been the primary problem, have not been able to agree on a plan, these utilities have not been installed. Recently, there was a lawsuit about the sewer line that they are proposing. That lawsuit has been settled, and now Springbrenner Walker is planning to go ahead with the sewer portion of this in 2024. Okay? But I started looking at this and saying, why is it taking so long? If you were to read the Act 537s, which is the agreements that the sewer authorities operate by, there were numerous discussions because the 45-acre parcel here borders right here is a UAJA facility. Mm-hmm. And I'll show you, if we go to page 10, they're planning on running, I don't think it got into your packet, but I will show you a picture. They're planning to run the sewer all the way to Bellefonte. Okay, because Springbrenner Walker does not have any sewer facilities in their area. They run all theirs to Bellefonte. And they've been unable to work out a deal with the UAJA. So, what I am proposing is ALERTA so that we can bring in the utilities needed to develop this 61-acre parcel. You start doing the math, the school district is out just shy, take 800,000 times 12 years. You're just shy of $10 million, guys, that could have been paid to you in tax dollars. So how Alerta operates, I am thinking it's going to take somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million to bring the other utilities to these 61 acres. We need to do the following. If we could go back to the drawing number 5, I think it'd make it much, oh, thank you. Okay. We are planning, we need to put, you'll see Spring Brenner Road here. That is not really, that's not a township road. That is an easement with a driveway on it. And the UAJA needs to expand it. They can't get 2 trucks by each other. So I've been in discussions with them. They're also very concerned about the trucks pulling out on the Shiloh Road. They would love to have a traffic light there. Now, if my plan goes through, about 2 weeks ago, I signed a deal with a big box down in Harrisburg. They're buying 22 acres of commercial land from me. I would love to bring them up here and have them take the other side of my 45 acres, okay? They will generate plenty of traffic for a traffic light. So I think we're going to have the traffic necessary for the traffic light if it's necessary. We also need to bring a water line up. The water line right now sits down here. So we need to bring it up Shiloh Road, the same thing with the gas line. And then bring them up and then bring them halfway down this new, Spring Valley Road would become a township road. And we would also be getting money from the UAJA for the construction of this road. But the costs here, you're looking at a couple $1 million of infrastructure needed, which is really quite large for any one developer. That's why I'm coming to you and I'm working with the Clare family to put together a partnership so that we can bring the utilities, thus we can develop this area. If you've done any commercial development, there are very few people who are willing commercially to come in and spend this kind of money on infrastructure, unless they're doing an extremely large project, extremely large. And so far, these parcels have been up for sale and no one's offered to do that. Alerta proposal, like I said before, is a tax abatement. There are currently 2 LERTAs going on in the area, one for the Bellefonte Borough and one for the State College Borough that are occurring right now. They are both being done through an outfit in Harrisburg called Delta Development. I've worked with Delta Development to get road grants for a dealership, Lexus dealership I just built down in Lancaster. What I am proposing is that we have them come up and make a formal, knowledgeable presentation to you on the ins and outs of Alerta so that you can start to recover some of your tax dollars. Because otherwise, I don't know how much longer you're going to be waiting for these tax dollars. Alerta is usually over a 10-year period, and it starts out with 100% first year of the improvement, the tax on the improvement, not the land that's sitting there now, but on the improvement. It starts out at 100%, 90, 80, 70, 60, works its all the way down to 10%. And I am thinking, from my rough estimation here, that we would probably need 24 of the 61 acres to be in this program, which means 61% of it would be able, you would be able to receive tax dollars from day one with this. So you'd still be getting the same amount of money you're getting now. It would vastly speed up the pace in which the 61 acres could be developed, and you would be getting the 2/3 of it right off the bat. So I think it's a pretty good deal for the school, because you guys are the ones, in my mind, who have suffered the most from the municipalities not being able to work together and get this done. So, I am happy to entertain, oh, on the last one, can you put it up just for a second, just so they can see? I don't know how well you guys can see this, but do you see the yellow line? Mm-hmm. This is where they're proposing to run the sewer, guys.
That cost is that being borne by the developers?
Nope, nope, that,
The only costs that you're talking about are on the properties that abut or connect with Shiloh Road and Spring Valley.
right. The gas, the water, and the roadway
Thanks, Peter.
to bring it up to there.
So, Mr. Ferris has been contacting me for the last several months, asking to get on your agenda. And when we spoke prior to January 1st, I had expected that in a January Finance Committee meeting is when we would have Mr. Ferris come, based upon conversations with then Board President and Vice President Amy Bader and Amber Concepcion. Actually, those conversations may have they were even before December 1st, before the board leadership change. Since our meeting format has changed, we felt that it would be necessary to have opportunity for a more lengthy discussion instead of taking up the time at a committee of the whole structure meeting as we have now. So I believe that Mr. Ferris provided the information that he has shared with me previously. Just wanted you to be aware of that. I think that for those of you who are not familiar or as familiar with the previous LRTA request that the school district denied, that the county and the State College Borough did approve, this one looks a little bit different to me. I'm not necessarily prepared to speak to that tonight unless you want me to. I think that tonight the idea was to let Mr. Ferris make his presentation. You can let this sink in and then decide how you want to take action, if you want to take action at a future time.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Ferris while he's here?
I have two questions. On slide 7, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding the math
Sure.
correctly. I think one of your numbers is wrong. When I look at your example, you're suggesting that maybe there's $100,000 in tax dollars per year times 10 years is $1 million.
Right.
And then at the bottom of that, you say we would get 500,000 over 10 years.
Well,
But
One
when
of
I
your-
add up your sliding scale, I only get 450,000. So I'm just trying to,
you must be a math teacher.
I'm a math person, but
Okay. I just was ballparking it.
You were ballparking.
I didn't
Okay,
go
that's
through
good.
and do it by year.
it's just when you're trying to look at it ahead of time without,
Sure, I told,
Okay.
you are the math expert.
okay,
Yes.
so anyway, so I think it's 450,000 over 10 years. We'd be giving up 550,000 and we'd be receiving 450,000. So for those that didn't catch that, that's one thing on that slide.
Well, no, I think you would be collecting, you would be getting 400. If I'm getting, there's $1 million total. So if I'm getting 450, you're going to get 550.
Yeah, but I think if I'm reading it right, in the first year, are we giving you 100% abatement?
Yes,
Yeah, so then we're getting 0 in the first year.
right.
We're getting 10% in the second
Right.
year, 20% in the third year. If you add them up, you come up with 450,000. So we get the 450, you get the 550.
Wow.
That's
Right.
That'll work.
in this particular example.
In
I
this
just-
example.
It matters.
Sure,
I like
thank
to be
you.
precise.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's my first question.
Yes.
And then the second one, I just want to understand, on slide 8, if we want to think about whether we want to approve the LRTA, are we approving a LRTA for the entire 61-acre parcel? Or do we approve it developer by developer? Like, you're here representing Bobby,
Well, I'm here representing, actually, everybody. I'm representing, I am CEO and president of Bobby Rahal.
okay.
I'm the owner of Ferris Land Development, who has a contract for the 45-acre parcel. And then the Claire family has said they will work with me, they are not developers, on this project. It's silly we both need the same utilities brought to our site.
Right.
So it's silly for us to work separately. So I'm trying to represent everybody all together for this.
But I believe that you also said that the LERTA would be effective for just 21 acres of the parcel.
Well, my estimation to come up with the money we need would be 24 of the 61 acres.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to ask.
Just trying to do the math based upon, if we're 8 acres of 61 acres.
Right.
It's roughly 1/8.
So I think to answer your question, yes, he's representing, it sounds like, all three interested parties of the initial developers.
Right.
Any future owners, developers of the parcels may or may not be involved with the LERTA as well. It depends. I think that this is just an introductory conversation, and we would need more information.
Okay.
And that's why I think what Mr. Ferris, I think what's important that Mr. Ferris said is that this is a draft proposal to express, to understand interest.
Sure.
And that a more formal proposal, similar to what this board had received previously, would come if there was interest. So,
This Alpha Delta development, they would come, no cost to the school, and talk to you, and they do numerous of these, okay? Like they're doing the 2 here in this area right now. I think there's another one they just didn't want me to mention that's about to occur. So they would come and they would explain, I need to learn all the ins and outs of it also. Is it going to be the first developers? Is it going to be how it's going to work? We're going to have to figure out how it's going to work.
There's
I
a
am probably going to wind
big
up.
difference to the district if we approve alerta for a segment of the 61 acres, or if we would consider approving it for the whole. So it's important,
right,
if
but you
we
don't
ask you
need-
to come with a bigger proposal, that be spelled out, so that
Okay.
we know what we're actually talking about.
and I
Okay.
think that would be the expectation.
Yeah, my thoughts.
It's fine
is
to not know the answer
It's going to
tonight,
be some
but-
way, and it might be divided. Like, let's say my big box comes along and buys the 25 acres, and they're the second party in this, shall we say, development. We will not need, we would only need 16 of their 25 acres. Okay, so we might get, it may be 2/3 of theirs, and then everybody else would be paying 100% in from day one. We need to sit down and look at this, but before they go through and do all the math,
Right.
I'm just trying to see, is there interest to maybe look at this? Because this isn't just one developer, myself, this is 61 acres of ground, and this is a lot of development.
Amy, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I had to get to the mute button. My question is for Randy. So, Randy, I was on the board for the other LERTA, and LERTA is a very specific legal characterization, and my recollection is that has to be, like, we went through a whole thing about what zones downtown were predetermined and available to even discuss alerta. So I'm just a little perplexed knowing the definition of alerta from that, how this particular parcel would even qualify. And that's not an answer I need tonight, but that is a big question I have, because you and I have talked about the difference between alerta and a TIF and other things. And I'm just, based on the fact that it was like dilapidated properties before, I'm a little confused how former farmland turned commercial fits the bill for alerta. But that's just one of my, so I would need to see more legal information about how and why this parcel even would possibly qualify.
That's a very fair question, and again, I think that we would expect that the developer, and if they choose to use this Delta Development Corporation, they could provide what they believe to be their expectation of qualification, and then we can ensure that that is correct. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, it's helpful. I'm just a little surprised that's not information isn't in this initial presentation, because that's like a baseline requirement, and it's a moot discussion if the parcel doesn't qualify. And in the past discussion of alerta, that was brought forth immediately as the first step of the process about why the development project even would qualify. So just some feedback for Mr. Ferris, and that's kind of really an essential piece of justification.
I have had a couple conversations with Delta Development. Like I said, I've worked with them before on a grant for Lancaster. And so I had conversations with them and talked to them about this. We talked both about a TIF and alerta. Alerta covers commercial and industrial, so that's where they thought, they know exactly where this parcel is and what it's about, and they thought Alerta would cover it without an issue.
It's actually not just commercial and industrial. It has to be designated to have been in a dilapidated or decrepit state. There's really specific federal, I believe, regulations about what qualifies for Alerta, because we went through this process not too long ago. So it's not just about what type of property it is, it's about where it's located and the condition of the property. And the goal of Alerta is to try to get areas that aren't being developed because of potential degradation of the property to finally be developed, not necessarily new farmland that has been flipped over to now be available for development. That's kind of a somewhat different situation. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I know Mr. Eder helped us a lot with that when we discussed it last time.
Dr. Buck.
Yeah, I was just going to make a process comment that it seems like there are quite a few questions, and that it might be a good idea to aggregate, collate what the questions are, make sure that we understand the things that are on the table, and then either put that into our co-chairs for finance and have them make some recommendations, and or then bring it to one of our discussion, when we do the committee of the whole kind of thing. I mean, that was my thought, but I don't want to get bogged down.
I had 3 questions. One is the same that Amy just asked, because I was also on the board with the other LERTA, the request, and I remember exactly what Amy just said about the blighted area and the degradation of buildings and that kind of thing. And I thought the same thing. This is farmland that has not been developed yet, so legally I would be curious if that's even possible. So that was
blighted was the word I could not think of, Gretchen. Blighted.
Blighted, yep, that's what it says in the actual LERTA language. And then the second question, so I have 3. That was my first. My second is, would the other already existing Bobby Ray Hall Honda dealership close if this one is developed?
But it
Yes.
would move, yes.
Okay.
We would sell the real estate and move it.
Is that a property that your company or a subsidiary owns? Is the Dix family or?
We own it.
You own it?
We own it.
And I'm assuming at this point you don't have a plan for it, which is what I was thinking as well.
We'd be selling it.
Okay, so unless there's a buyer right away that's going to use it, this is in that conversation as well. We gain tax revenue, but potentially lose tax revenue at the existing site.
Well, I
That's
still
a-
probably got to pay the taxes even if I'm not there, don't I?
But if it's not being used, it could be potentially less.
Okay. I've
Okay,
been,
no,
you know,
that was my question. It's answered,
I would
so
think
thank
the
you. But
amount of
unless Scott
commercial real
has
estate
more
moving there,
questions about it.
it should move pretty reasonably.
All right.
Scott, I have one more.
No,
Do you
go
have
for it.
any more, Scott?
It's just a follow-up to yours.
Okay, okay. I have just one more, and that is, if the school district does not grant this LERTA, would this dealership be built anyway?
Possibly the dealership, but none of the rest of it. Because in my talks with the township, I think they're very frustrated about the sewer issue. And one of the supervisors proposed to me, because our water usage is so small, that we build a septic field and open it on a septic field. So that even if the sewer doesn't, because the sewer's 2 years away from happening, that would impede it. Okay? I just don't know. I'd have to work out a deal with the seller. The seller is a 70-some-year-old woman who is not interested in getting in she lived at that farm most of her life, and then they came along and rezoned it. She's not a commercial developer. She's not interested in getting into subdivisions and doing all that's necessary. So I hate to say it, I don't think it would move along. The same thing with the Clare family. The Clare family are not real estate developers, okay? I've become a real estate developer basically because the Bobby Rahal organization, which I own 40% of, has 13 locations in the state of Pennsylvania, and I've built 10 of them from the ground up, so I'm a lot more familiar with development.
So just so because now I'm trying to remember what you said. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
You said possibly. Is that
I'm
the
not,
answer?
we have to run more of the numbers.
Possibly, okay.
We had to first, where are we getting to this point? Well, I had to wait till the lawsuit on the sewer facility was resolved to find out which way that was going to go. That has been resolved, and now I've been waiting to meet with you to come up with a plan. My engineers are working on the cost for all the infrastructure. You know, the 1.5 to 2 million was a ballpark from the two of us, but, you know, they do it every day, so they have a pretty good idea what it costs to run so many feet of pipe. But that would be too great of an expenditure to do on a, well, to give you an idea, it would cost almost the cost of the land with what you're going to spend in infrastructure.
No, it's just helpful. I mean, thank you for your answer. It's helpful because
Sure.
I asked the same exact question with the last LRTA.
Yeah.
And the answer was, yes, we're going to build it anyway, but it might not be to the same scale. So it's just helpful to know
Well.
what might or might not happen with or without the LRTA.
Mine would probably
So
not be to the
I appreciate your
scale.
answer, though, so thank you very
Mine would not be to the
much.
scale, and it might take a long time for it to occur.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right. Are there any other questions for Mr. Ferris while he's here?
Just a quick one. Thank you, Mr. Ferris, for bringing this proposal to our attention
Pleasure.
and for acknowledging this is at the concept level. There's a lot that would need to be defined in this for it to begin to make sense
Right.
in terms of what we might be getting ourselves into. One of the things to say about this, for those who weren't around the first time, is that while this includes a 10-year schedule, it could be a schedule other than that. It could be introduced over a 5-year period of time with the ratios changing. I mean, as I remember at the time, we're not stuck necessarily doing within a 10-year interval of the abatement. It can be organized over 5 years with a 20% change every year. So we would wind up perhaps from the district's perspective in a more favorable situation. One of the things about this I wonder about, and this is more of a question I have maybe for my co-chair, the finance co-chair and I to ask, which is about how the dynamics of this in terms of introducing different assessed values over time. Because as the property is developed, the value is going to go up during that same 5 or 10 year interval, and what the impact of that would be like in terms of, that's not how it works. Okay.
Its value is set when the property comes online.
Okay.
Becomes usable, and it's the tax that's actually abated,
Okay, right.
percentage of the tax.
I was just wondering about the actual, what's the start date for the change in
I
assessment?
wasn't trying to interrupt you, but
That's okay. No, it's all right. No, I just need to have that clarified. So we're talking about it being built and then it being assessed and then starting the LRTA essentially.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Potentially, yes.
Thank you, thank
So
you.
if I could just circle back up.
Yeah.
There's been lots of good questions. There still probably are more questions. You can circle them. I think circling them through Deb, Dan, and myself is a good process. I think that, Mr. Ferris, before we give any further consideration, we need some sort of documentation or proof that Delta Development believes that this is eligible for a LRTA.
Okay.
To make sure that we're
Sure.
not spinning our wheels.
Sure. No problem. No problem. I'm pretty sure they are pretty confident. Otherwise,
I
Um,
understand.
she wouldn't have, I mean, we had pretty good calcs, and I'd be happy to bring them up. I just didn't want to take more of your time than
That's
necessary.
perfect. Thank
Before
you.
we start. Thank you very much for
Yeah,
your time.
thank you so much for coming today.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
I'll follow it up
Thank
with
you.
Mr. Brown. Thank you.
Okay.
You want me to show the presentation?
That'd be great, Randy.
All right, moving on to information discussion. Item 4B. Peter Buck will now provide an overview of the solar power purchase agreement initiative.
Look at those handsome people. I'm just kidding.
It's a good-looking boardroom.
Are they cardboard cutouts? I mean,
I
come
know.
on.
It's really sad. No, I want to thank the board for making this happen this evening, so that we can have a work session where we're going to be able to talk about the volume commitment for the solar power purchase agreement. I'll give an overview of the status, the kind of the who, the what, the why, the how, I'm going to give a little bit more context than we've had previously, and summary of where we are and what the next steps are. And I want to give a really special thanks to some people who are in the room. Obviously, Gretchen has been on this with me. Jim Leos was on the board at the time that this was initiated, and he is pictured there. He's here with us tonight. Obviously, Randy Brown has been the director of our project management team and has been really invaluable making sure that we're sticking to our timelines. And also Pam Adams and Joe Vigilone from the Center Region Council of Governments, the finance officer and the sustainability planner are here with us. And there are more people involved that I'll probably end up thanking later. But this really is an incredible team effort. And, you know, you should recognize the people who pitched in. So thank you all. You can go to the next slide. We're going to get through all of this. Wow, these were not the slides that I had loaded up earlier. So that's a lot of fun. And can you, no, nope. Wow, that's not my presentation.
Hold on.
But you know what?
Hold on.
That's okay, because I know my presentation, and we can start at slide 3, and we're going to be okay, Randy. I promise.
Here, try
Yes, this is my presentation.
There we go. I pulled the wrong one up. We're good. Is that yours?
Nope.
This is
No,
what we
it's
done.
it's all right. Randy, if you go to slide 2, we'll be okay.
Hold on.
Yay, there we go. That's where you want to start. Hey, look at that. Thank you very much.
All right, why is that not working?
I don't know. It's okay.
There we go.
That's great. I think context is really important for any of these actions because the Solar Power Purchase Agreement Working Group is not operating in a vacuum. And a number of the emails that we received in support of this project, I think, make that really clear. Just stay there.
Sorry.
The organizations from the United Nations Environmental Program to the World Economic Forum, down to the United States Department of Defense, including the Air Force, the White House, now the United States Senate, and Congress, and the Pennsylvania state government have all declared that climate change is something that we have to take action on. And one of the best things that we can do to take action on it is to change our energy portfolio at every single scale. As Dr. Michael Mann made clear in an email today, the globe has warmed approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 140 years. And a large reason, and that's caused by the amplification of the greenhouse effect, caused in large part by generation from fossil fuels. So changing our energy mixture makes a huge difference. And so the Solar Power Purchase Agreement is seen as a way to take on that challenge at every single scale of every single organization. Next slide. So the State College Area School District is geographically synonymous with the Council of Governments. We have 6 municipalities that directly feed into the school district. The Council of Governments itself passed a resolution committing to climate action, and then passed a climate action adaptation plan that is featured on the next slide as well, that commits the region to a 45% reduction in greenhouse gases. Don't go to the next slide yet. 45% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030 and 80% by 2050. The remaining 20% are to be taken up in carbon sequestration and other carbon abatement projects. There are 4 municipalities, Ferguson, Harris, Patton, and State College Borough, which have passed resolutions that commit them to either net zero greenhouse gases and or 100% renewable energy. Okay, that is 85% of the population of the State College Area School District has local governments committing those governments to that action and the regions therein, the people therein. And then we have our SCASD Policy 833, which is aspirational and directional, but has no target within it. But it does have words about stewardship, environmental stewardship, and stewardship of energy. Next. So I think that just because some governments took some action, that doesn't necessarily tell you that the people in the region agree. One of the great things about the work that, I'll just point to Pam Adams, that she has done in partnership with where I work, the Sustainability Institute at Penn State, is to do a community survey and to do deliberations and discussions about climate action. Over 1,500 residents participated and submitted responses to these. 77% of property owners in the area and 81% of renters want local governments, we are a local government, to commit to 100% renewable energy. Getting 80% of Americans to agree on anything seems impossible these days. That does track actually with Pew Research showing the same thing. And importantly, it's bipartisan. Youth are also very in favor of climate action. A Harris poll that was conducted in partnership with 4-H found that 91% of people the ages 13 to 19 have anxiety about the environment, and the majority of that comes from climate change. And they want, and they say repeatedly, we want grown-ups to take action. They want to see actions instead of just hear words. Finally, there are renewable energy goals stated in the Climate and Action and Adaptation Plan in the center region. I won't say any more about that. Finally, next slide.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much, Randy. Solar energy and local government development, including school districts across the country, is growing, and it's growing pretty rapidly. So we are part of a trend, and I would say it is not trendy. It's not like just some thing where it's like, oh yeah, it's like a great fashion. No, it's because the price keeps being good, and it's taking action on things that the public repeatedly says is important to them. So I just wanted to provide that context because very often in our own project management team and what we've been talking about is we're like, the price. And that's good, we have to. We're stewards of taxpayer dollars, but all of these other things really matter as well. Next slide. So we set up these guiding principles to guide our group, and those, you can read them. We want to reduce costs. We want to mitigate exposure to the volatility of the energy market. We want to, I just spent a lot of time talking about climate change, promote the solar market, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say that through our group, next slide, we have certainly been able to act on 6 of the 7 of these. The 7th, provide structures aesthetically compatible with the facilities surrounding the neighborhoods. That is really on the developers, and we can provide some impetus for that. But on all of these other 6, with very high confidence, I can say that the project management team has delivered something to us at this point. So we have something, the costs are low. We would, by engaging in the project, mitigate exposure to the budget volatility of the market. All of these, every single one of them, the project management team has projects in front of us that do all of them. And I want to say just a little bit about the amount of time. There have been about 40 project management teams in the last 9 or 10 months. Okay, there are 11 people when you include the consultant. And if you put that into people hours, we are at a minimum of 250 people hours in just the meetings. And when you add all of the people hours, which are frankly pretty hard to do, but we're somewhere between 500 and 1,000 hours of work. The results that we've gotten come from detailed, tenacious, sometimes agonizing questions that were like, didn't we already answer this question? No, we got to answer it a few different ways, a few different times. So there's a lot of confidence in recommendations to come. Next slide. This is who we are. I've already said enough about us. And this is where we are where we want to be able to commit a volume. Next slide. Yeah. So I've talked about this in previous meetings, right, where we are in the process regarding the request for proposals. I don't need to review this. Next slide. So what we've gotten before is every one of the organizations involved, including the school district, and there are 15 organizations, has done a standard contract, 2, 3, 4, 5 years at the most, that have fixed rates. So one of the questions that we've gotten is fixed rates. We've done lots of fixed rates in the past, right? It's just, it hasn't been a 15-year fixed rate. It's usually been 2, 3, 4, 5. But we are in the habit very much of doing those. We've worked through our retail services supplier and gotten a bill that looks very much like the bill that's pictured there on the right. Next slide. So what would be different now is that we have, depending on how much, if we do market and solar, the bill looks different, and we need help managing the bill. Okay, so which is why when we put out for a contract, both to developers, so we need developers of the solar projects themselves, and then we were not able to engage directly with the developer for the bill, so that has to be managed for us. None of us are energy procurement managers. We don't have a fleet of people, not that there's a fleet of them at the university, but we don't have like a whole office dedicated to just that, because that's a big endeavor. So we need a retail services, to manage that for us. So when the bill comes, we have what the bill looked like before, and then all of the material related to the solar. So the kilowatt hours received, according to the fixed price, the solar settlement, and we can really geek out on solar settlement if we want to, but at the end of the day, the solar settlement is just included in the bill. It'll move up and down over the course of the year, and we'll see that in a coming slide. We should anyway. And then the solar management fee. Okay, and then we have the rest of the bill, and the comparison of those year on year, we would hope, would be, and we have every reason to believe, will be cheaper with the solar than the market rate that we have now. So next slide. Okay, there it is. So the net settlement, if anybody really wants to super dig into net settlement, we can, and I know Joe's quite good at talking about it, and so is Pam. We can answer questions. But over the course of the year, a solar farm will produce more in the summer and less in the winter, but over the course of the year, right, and month on month, there's a settlement. And the settlement will come in as a credit or not. And over the course of the year, those even out, and the price that we get is within a handful of percent of that fixed rate. And so you have a lot of budget certainty with it, even with this up and down over the course of the year. Next slide. Okay, so this is what we did before. We had our groups commit to a possible amount. We said 60 to 85% for the State College Area School District. And when it went out in the request for proposals, the band that went out to the developer was 50% up to 100%. So roughly with the whole group, about 17.5 million kilowatt hours up to about 35 million kilowatt hours. So developers looked at that and they said, okay, well, what could we, what would we show you? Okay. Next slide. I actually think that this slide is not the most helpful slide because there are things in it that create uncertainty, and there are apples and oranges in there, and we're not going to include them. So I'm just going to move on. All right. So if on the left, so the blue would be, it's basically it's a representation of a possible price per kilowatt hour. Because the price per kilowatt hour in the proposals that cannot be released to the public. So I can't actually put the number in there, okay? So we used 6 cents per kilowatt hour just as a representation, because that's about the average rate of the last 12 years. It's very close. So Joe asked the question, can we see what it would look like if we were 50% below the market, and 50% above the market? What would that look like per kilowatt hour? So we have 6 versus about 4, 6 versus 7, because 7 is around, actually right now it's much higher than that, but say 7 cents, and then if it were 50% over 7 cents, what would that look like? And that's set very high over 10. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so if we had 100% solar in our commitment, or any of the entities' commitment, we're 100% solar, that line in the middle is that it's just being represented as 6 cents per kilowatt hour. On the left, if the market were beating our rate, that's just a good graphic representation of the amount over that we would be paying over the market. The chance that what is represented there on the left is very, very unlikely. Okay. And then on the right, the farther to the right we go, the more we gain on the market, because the market price is very high. Next slide. And then this is just a similar representation of if we had a 60%, what that would look like. And so you're managing the risk and the volatility a little bit differently depending on the volume. Next slide. Okay, so the project management team, and a lot of this comes from Greg at Green Sky, who has done a lot of work and has been working in this area for a long time. So the solar power purchase agreement is expected to provide a discount to future market pricing. Greg estimates that at 10%, but an estimate is an estimate, and so no one should hold anyone to, well, you said 10%, because what if it's 8? Well, what if it's 14? I mean, there would be a wobble in that, right? Right now, it would be way better than that, because if you go and shop for electricity, it's 9.6 cents per kilowatt hour for an institution. It's definitely not 6. The PPA is a fixed rate with a 1.5% escalator on it, so that creates a lot of budget stability. So whatever you put in there, you have very, 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 very high confidence of what your bill is going to be year on year, because it's just your kilowatt hour times that rate within this little band because of the net settlement. The usage not covered by the solar generation will need to be managed, so that's why the retail services provider is included in this, and they would manage the remainder of that market cost by putting it into 2, 3, 4, 5 year fixed rate pieces of the portfolio. And then
Peter?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt and throw you off. when you say the usage not covered, we're not talking about the settlement stuff. We're just talking about if we weren't at 100%.
Correct.
Whatever
Right.
the balance would be, we
Yeah.
would do short-term agreements.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Bader. So if it were 75%, the 25% of electricity that we would have to purchase that is not in the solar agreement, that it would be that portion. Does that answer the
Gotcha.
question clearly?
Yes, thank you. I just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm.
Thank you. So if the goal is just to have sort of stability, doing 50-50 would be fine. You would have stability, 50% of it, you would know what it would be, and then the remaining 50% would be in the market, understanding that that's where the volatility is going to be. But you would have a fixed rate for half of it. For those with either a real desire for price certainty and budget certainty, or who have stated climate goals, which recognize we do not, going 75 to 100% is the recommendation from the group. Next slide. If you want to see what the anticipated price curve is, there it is. It's on the right. That dotted line is 15 years of solar, and it is below the projected average market rate. And that's basically the graphic representation of that 10%-ish below the market rate. Okay? Next slide. So, finally, expectations, and I believe there's, maybe one or two slides after this. So it would be to purchase the solar at below wholesale grid supply, which we have lots of confidence in. Understand and minimize risks. The working group has done so much work to understand and minimize the risks. We've shown a basic bill so that you can see more or less how that would work out. Really importantly, each entity gets to work out their own contract. We are not responsible for working out, and God love them, Patton Townships, for example. We love you, Patton Township. Thank you for being involved and having humans that have other humans that come to our schools. But they will be responsible for their own contract. And then the solar initiation, we would anticipate that it would start in the fall of 2024 to 2026, and that's because of land development, final financing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there is no risk associated with when the new project and new contracts align with our existing power bill. That's not something that we have to worry about. So in terms of where we are, I've already articulated where we are, and we hope to have a volume commitment, not hope to. We need to have our volume commitment this month, right? And we're not voting on that tonight, but we're certainly going to talk about it. And is that the last slide? I think it is. Okay. Thank you very much for your patience.
Clarify, when you said this month, I think we've actually moved that to February.
Yes, February. So I'm just thinking, look, I'm jumping ahead. I said earlier I'm the most impatient person on this board, so, I'm already thinking that it's February when it's only January 30th. So I appreciate it, and I know there are members of the public who are here who want to speak to this, and we have questions.
Should we have Pam and Joe come up in case there's any questions?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Go for it.
Peter,
Marion. Oh,
yeah, quick question.
Wait, no, I think we let Miriam go first.
Oh, I didn't realize there was one to my right.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It's just really exciting to hear that we're working on this on a community level. I just had a question about student involvement. Are there any plans for that? And looking ahead, I just think it's really important to let students know that we're doing this.
Yes. So there are projects that we're looking at that are in Center County and Greene County. And when we did the interviews, the developers we spoke to, we asked them this question. And both of them committed to providing educational access for the projects. And as the question was asked, it ranged from data, like, how's it producing? Can we have a dashboard? And they're like, yeah, sure. I mean, that's very cheap. But then to things like, we have a CTC, right? We have, career and technical education, so that I'm not using acronyms. You know, the career and technical school. Could there be apprenticeships, internships? Those, they did not say no to anything and said, well, we would love to do that. We would just have to make sure that it's part of the agreement. So, awesome.
Dr. Duffy?
Yeah, quick question. Just to ask you, Peter, if you go back to one of the earlier slides in terms of explaining just the bar chart, in terms of the values represented in the bar chart.
Mm-hmm.
What slide, what would it be?
Up.
Oh.
Keep going. Keep.
It's 17.
Next one. Yep, there you go.
17.
Hey, look at that. Joe's here. Pam's here. Pam, you want to take it? Yeah.
If you can explain the meaning of those conditions and those three circumstances regarding the SPPA market values, how are they? What are the conditions that make them create a different outcome for those?
The conditions are the market prices.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. The conditions are the market prices. So if you go to a later slide on there, and Pam, I won't hold you to this, but there were market prices projections.
Yes.
I think it was on slide 20 or 21 in that area. Keep going.
That one.
That one. And so that is the base. And then the top and the bottom was a 50% increase in market prices and a 50% decrease in market prices from there.
Got it.
Right. And I think it's really one of the things when you say 50% and 50%, our brains can try to make that 50% lower, 50% likelihood, and 50% higher as likely. And the 50% lower, I see someone in the audience who is like shaking their head like, no, absolutely not. That one on the left, really unlikely.
Right.
The one on the right, kind of where we have been.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Other questions?
Yeah, I think, well, just to reflect on that for a moment, the likelihood that prices are going to go down for the traditional market, I think would be absurd, frankly. You know? So it'll at least be stable. And it might be stable and to the extent that there's a lot of solar power that will enter the market, and it might, and this is where my lack of understanding of economics will kick in. When there's more solar power in the market, that might reduce demand, and therefore might reduce the market value of the cost of traditional energy.
So one of the things, because that was something that Greg Shively at Green Sky spoke to. In order for that to come in and really depress that market, it would have to happen so fast.
Okay.
Right, and he's like, that is also very unlikely to happen. Just given the nature of the market as it's been, even though it is the fastest growing sector in the power sector,
right.
It's like the likelihood that it would happen that fast it's like real hard.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions?
So I have several. Following on a little bit to what Dan just asked, I mean, in addition to more solar coming on, which could bring the price in the traditional market, presumably the cost of solar energy is also going down? Like, it's gone down in the last 5 to 10 years, I think. Is that right?
Considerably.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're contemplating signing a 15-year contract at a fixed price, presumably we're going to be signing it for a price that, like, the price of solar, if we sign this contract 5 years from now, would be lower than we would be signing it for today?
You want to take that, Pam?
And is that a piece of risk that we're assuming?
It certainly could, but it's really exponentially come down and it's at where it's been kind of steady. And what I'm hearing from people in the solar field, I'm not an expert by any means, is that the efficiencies are going to increase, not necessarily the cost, and it's going to be large scale. So it could be that they'll get a little bit more efficiency, so we might get a little bit more out of it. But the efficiencies have been improving, so it's really at that part where now they might,
Yeah.
it has kind of flattened out.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that it couldn't come down a little bit more. The tax incentives and such are there, and they should be there for the next couple years, but then those are going to go away. So there's kind of this balance of how low are they really going to go, because they want to make sure they'll be able to recoup it when those tax credits go away.
And if I can just add one thing, so if you look at Energy Information Agency data and International Energy Agency data and projections, it like where we are is in the pretty much the like a glide, right? It has come down so much, and those efficiencies are not going to have substantive impacts. And Greg said the same thing, I think it was 2 weeks ago in our meeting.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. I think our current energy contract ends in July 2023.
June 30.
Okay. But this is not going to come online. I'm not going to find the date real quick. But anyway, and for
2024 to 2026.
yeah. So in the short term, what are our options? Like, do we have an alternative bid or potential contract to choose from our current energy consultant?
Yep.
Are we even going to look at that? Like, if we're making a decision about whether or not we're going to do this or not, to me, it's helpful to have the alternative. I am one of 8 currently. And so if I'm the only one, then I can make my decision without that information. But I guess I would like to know what the alternative choice looks like. Does that make sense as a question? And then does anybody else, did I ask that? Like, you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is if we're going to commit to the SPPA, you basically want to know like what would the alternative be to this? Like if we just didn't do the SPPA and continued buying energy in the same 2 to 5 year
Yeah.
increments at fixed rates, what would that look like?
I am curious, I guess, because I guess it's like it's a two-step decision, right? Like we've been told all along, we haven't officially said, yes, we're going to do it, right? So we need to decide if we're going to do it, and that somewhat depends upon the price, and the price depends upon how much we would be willing to put in. So we're going to be asked how much we'd be willing to put in order to figure out our price, but then we need to decide whether or not we're going to do it. So in order to figure out whether or not we're going to do it, I guess I would like to see the alternative.
So if
That would be helpful to me.
and Randy, Pam, and Joe, when that contract shows up with the price, you know, what I would do is I would look at what the electricity market is like then and say, well, what is it right now? Because that's really, like, at any moment, that's what we have. And we have projections, so we could be like, well, what might the price of electricity be in the fall of 2024? And make the decision about that comparison? Because those are kind of your options.
Well, I mean, I guess even if we go with the SPPA, we don't get the solar until the fall of
That's right.
2024. Do we have to go with the retail services provider within the SPPA? Or could we stick with our current energy supplier? And those are two apples to apples comparisons that you could theoretically look at, because those would be they would be short-term contracts. A 2 to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, because I have not been a part of this process, so I'm really trying to understand.
Sure.
So I haven't been a part of the process of doing our last energy contract, because I wasn't on the board then. So I don't have that experience to compare to, but I'm just curious.
Yep. So my sense is the retail services provider will be able to lock in a price, I think, is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Until we get that SPPA. So we're going to get their price, and we're going to shop, I would assume that you're going to look at what you could get, so that we're getting some idea that making sure they're taking, they're not taking
Yes.
us for, oh, we've got them in our pocket, so they'll up the price. So we will be looking at other prices, if that's what you want, but I think we would. I mean, just because we're going to have to confirm that the retail services provider is giving us a good price, but these are the finance guys.
I'm just glad,
That's what I would do, too.
that's what I would do too. So I'm glad to have that validated by someone else.
And we know what the market, I mean, we have 15 entities, we know what the market is approximately. But again, with one of the questions we just asked of Mr. Shively, and we haven't got an answer back on it yet, but it was what price is Direct Energy or whoever it is on the retail side of it going to offer us,
Exactly.
for that, to make sure that we're okay, but we're waiting on an answer back from that one.
And College and Patton have both had their contracts expire, and they've been going out to get the market price, and it's high, but prices have come down in the last 30 days or so, so
Right.
it is continuously moving. But of the 15 entities, we will have some ideas of where prices are, but it seems like a reasonable request.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and we would get an alternative.
Okay. So then is that clear direction from the board? Is that clear enough for Randy to talk to our current energy consultant to know what the alternative is? At least for that.
So there is a deregulated electricity market that they can just go out and shop on. They're like, well, here's this and here's that, and I don't mean to make it overly simplistic, but they can look around and bring you a rate, that's,
They, as in, just to clarify, not Randy.
not Randy. Right, whoever the energy services consultant is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I have one more question. It's as much a clarification, I think. Well, it's a combination, clarification for the public, but also a question for the board. If we're thinking about the amount of energy that we'd be willing to put into the SPPA, the verbiage we've been using is a percent.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really a percent, because in actuality, when we sign a contract, we're going to sign a contract for a fixed amount.
Correct.
And I think it's really important that the public understand that. This is not looking at the energy usage of the district and saying, we'd like to buy it all from the solar market, and we're going to only buy what we need at the moment that we need it.
Mm-hmm.
That is not an option. And that's just really important to me, because some of the emails that we were getting today were like, put in 100%. But it's 100% of what that we need to be talking about. It's not just what we use. So when we commit, we're going to commit to an amount, and we're going to pay for that amount of energy, whether or not we use it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we commit to 100% of our current usage,
Mm-hmm.
but then we go ahead and actually implement energy saving procedures, and we use less energy in the future, we're going to buy energy we don't need. So that's just really important for me to let people know. If we talk about something less than 100%, it's not that we don't have the commitment to the environment, it's that we're trying to be fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' money and not buy energy that we don't need. And that's just a really important, I think, distinction for people to know. So there's that distinction. And then, so we as a board need to think about, and we need to do some predicting of what our future energy needs are going to be, right? And we've talked about this a little bit. We know we need to do Park Forest Middle School. That might be an energy savings if their air conditioning is a lot more efficient, because how could it not be more efficient than what it
Wouldn't that
currently
be
is?
amazing?
Right? So that should be a savings. But we might, eventually move towards electric buses. So that's going to be more electricity. So we need to think about those things. And so there's a lot of work that has to go into that besides just, hey, I think I'd like to cover all of our energy needs with solar. It's just not that simple.
Right.
Let's let,
Joe, yeah.
thank you.
Those are the exact discussions that Pam and I have been having quite a bit because we've talked about a long-range facilities plan at COG. We've talked about moving to an electric fleet. So, yes, you're looking at this exactly how we are approaching it. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Joe just said and thinking about how we're going to have a facilities master plan, right? And there are discussions, say, about electric buses. What would that do? So electric buses, that's a future thing. We know it's there. So it's not part of the current equation, right? So that's, I think, really important to know. But like, so when we say 80%, and we turn that into a number at 14.7, million kilowatt hours per year, right? And you do 80%, you're talking about committing to about 11.76 million kilowatt hours that we would say we will purchase that. Given that we know that Mr. Fisher and Mr. Brown and other members of the board would like an aggressive energy savings campaign, 100%, it's like, well, that sounds great, but you can create a negative incentive at the top by having to pay for more expensive electricity. So why don't you drive that's the way I think about it anyway, right? But I appreciate that, Deb, because that is very much, that's been in the room in the project management team a lot.
Thanks.
Yep.
I guess my last question, and I still don't fully understand the whole settlement cost thing. And again, to let the public understand, it's sort of a fixed cost, but it's not really. And I feel like that only came up in the last couple of months. I don't remember having this conversation of it's not really a fixed cost earlier in the process. So if we could if others would be interested, if I'm the only one, then we don't need to do it. But if others would be interested in a little bit more explanation of the settlement cost and what does that mean and where does it come from, that would be helpful to me. But again, look at the rest of the board members and see if they'd like that as well.
Well, and I may be
I can help you.
Oh, yeah.
The settlement cost is a lot like putting solar panels on your own home. So I just recently went through this process. And so because, in the winter, you won't generate as much electricity and you'll have to buy from the grid. So the size of the array that you choose to put up is based on what your annual desired purchase will be. So you're going to wind up purchasing from the grid in the winter, but you're also going to wind up giving into the grid in the summer. And so that's just the settlement costs are in the winter, I wind up paying the electric company a little bit of money because I'm buying off the grid. But in the summer, they wind up giving me a credit because now I'm feeding into the grid and I'm not using everything I'm making. So it's very analogous. Peter, is that accurate to say it's basically balancing out just that generation?
I would say
you're over the course of a year, your goal is to be a net zero.
I would say it's analogous. It's very
right,
similar.
as I said, analogous.
Yeah, it's very similar. And I would say if you really want to dig into net settlement cost, because we do have time until the next agenda, we can get you really juicy explanations of net settlement cost, including to the board.
Well, it's just, I guess, in looking at the materials, both from this presentation and the one that you sent us after the last board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Every month, we are basically both selling our solar power that we're generating and buying it back. And the price at which we're buying it back is fixed. The price at which we're selling it is not.
Correct.
So even if every single month we only used the electricity that we generated, would this net settlement come out to be zero?
It's going to be within 5% on either side of it over the course of a year.
Yeah.
So every hour of every day, the market is buying and selling. So it will not come out to zero at the end of every day.
Right.
Nor over the year, really. I mean, but that's where, because if you have a really sunny day or a really sunny year, it's going to be a little different. But it is similar example that the voice
Dr. Bader.
Dr. Bader said, except that
It's a
it's,
television show.
From the cloud, the voice from the cloud.
sorry, every day and every hour, and it also depends on the location. So there are more factors that go into it. But
Exactly.
we are looking at, in Pennsylvania, potentially in Center County, so we're trying to minimize that hub and node where it's buying and selling. So
Right.
there are, you know, this whole calculation, settlement, price. But in general, it sounds like you understand it, but if you want to get more into it,
Yeah.
then we
And-
can, but.
And the long-term behavior and the predictability of the thing is so close to it that it just creates a lot of certainty. Even though it, like, there's these little things, the overall behavior is so consistent that, yeah, you can just, like, there it is. And Greg said, like, this is super consistent. It's barely going to move on either side of it.
Okay.
And it being the fixed price, right? Joe?
And if we can show two other charts up there, this is sort of it's the next two slides, Randy, the 18, 19. So if you do the solar, the fixed amount over there, you have more risk associated with the settlement costs, depending on which direction you go. But if you go to the 60-40 split, you know, we're 60% there, you're going to move and you're going to take out, because only 60% of your electricity will be tied to the solar portion, which would have the settlement cost. The other 40 would follow the market.
Right, which has its own risk. So, I mean,
Exactly.
it's just different risk. It's not less
Exactly.
risk, it's just different risk.
Different
That's
risk.
exactly it.
Cool.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's great.
Those were clarifying
Impressed.
questions. Thank
Yep.
you.
And that's what taxpayers should expect from their elected officials.
I'm impressed.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Buck?
I have one quick one.
Go for it, Dr. Bader.
Hi, Pam. This is Amy. I'm the voice in the walls. So, Peter, the one question would be is, so to Deb's point of, you know, if we committed to a sizable figure and somehow miraculously gained huge efficiencies and didn't need that amount, do we have the opportunity then to sell the excess off or recoup in any way, or are we at a loss? Just
Yep.
it's a
Contract is the contract. So, no.
So compared to your home
gotcha.
Right.
example,
Yep,
it's not similar.
that's right.
We are contracting to buy a certain quantity, and then we will use what we use.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I mean, I don't anticipate us having a dramatic. When have we ever had a decrease in power usage over time?
COVID.
Unfortunately, I mean, but it is a legitimate concern that brings up and something to consider.
Yep. Yeah, COVID did that, and we don't want to do that again.
I was going to say, please.
Yes, please. Please, no more.
And this is really basic piece of information I'm asking about, but in terms of what we're committed to through the contract, we're committed to purchase a certain amount, a certain volume, if you will,
Yep.
of electricity.
Yep.
At a certain set rate
Correct.
for 15 years.
Yes.
Okay.
With a 1 point, and it begins at one rate and it escalates 1.5% per year
Per year.
over the duration
Okay.
of that. And
Okay.
you know what it is.
And if you look at our traditional purchase, we could go back 15 years. I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that if we're looking at tracking costs over time, we could go back 15 years and see where we are now in relation to what electricity might have cost us 15 or 20 years ago. And from that, predict the future in terms of what costs might be like in the traditional market.
You can do that, but conditions really change, and things that are impacting the electricity market now were not impacting it then. So there are just a lot of things that make that really. And Greg said, well, you can do that, but probably you shouldn't do it because there are just other factors at play that are not going to make it an apple to an apple.
Yeah, it's a pretty primitive idea, but I thought I'd throw it
No,
out there.
but it's worth exploring. And we asked that question in several different ways, and what we got back was, yeah, it's not really going to help you out.
All
It's
right.
not going to help you understand it.
Okay, thank you.
So, should we? Yeah. Hear
Settle there?
from people?
Oh,
There are
yes.
people in the
We'll get to
public.
that, public comment.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. All right, thank you so much for that presentation. At this time, we will have public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for items discussed to this point on the agenda.
Thank you for coming.
As a reminder, public comment is a chance for community members to share their thoughts with the board. It is not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversations. You can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything important. Okay. Is there anyone in person who would like to make a public comment? And if so, you can definitely make your way to the podium and introduce yourself. Go for it.
Hi, my name is Laura Fowler. I'm here wearing several different hats. One is I'm a parent of a 7th grader and a 10th grader, one at Delta Middle School and one at the high school. I'm also the interim chief sustainability officer for Penn State, and in my spare time, I teach energy law. I will disclose that I do work with Dr. Buck, so do know him. I really actually applaud and support what the school district is doing in partnership with the local communities. As Peter laid out, this is actually a very urgent time to be thinking about climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has basically said, look, we have 10 years to fundamentally transition our systems globally. And a lot of what we do here in Pennsylvania matters quite a bit. We are 4th in the nation in terms of energy emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and methane emissions. Globally, we're 1% of emissions. Disproportionate impacts, you're seeing it in years like this where Pakistan had 33 million people impacted by floods. Those who are creating the problems are less impacted than those who are experiencing what we're seeing is flood, drought, and everything in between. I actually grew up in Oregon, and to go home and visit my family in Oregon is to have very stark conversations with my mom about how fast she can get out of her house before it burns down in the middle of an urban area. We've seen it here too. Last week, skiing with my kids at Tussey in the rain, it's 33 degrees and raining. The winters have warmed quite dramatically here in a measurable amount, so we are not immune from the effects of what we're seeing. So what we're seeing is the need for a fundamental shift in climate adaptation and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Really, really matters what we do here in Pennsylvania, and it matters to do it in partnerships. As I've been working with local governments across Pennsylvania on climate adaptation, a lot of different municipalities are sort of like, oh, how do we do this? They are looking actually to this region for the partnerships that they're seeing coming out of this proposed power purchase agreement. So do I think you should do it? Yes. I would love to see this happen. What amount? I do see also a tremendous amount of funding coming down on the electric bus side today. The announcement for regional buses was $1.7 billion. We're seeing more money than I have ever seen in my entire career coming down for energy efficiency, energy projects, and so forth. Penn State has invested in solar. We thought it would take a longer payback period, but I was trying to find earlier an article. That payback period has been much faster than we expected for 25% of our energy supplies. I'll put my energy law professor hat on. I watch the markets. They're quite volatile. You could look at Texas after the winter storm Uri. People were getting $18,000 bills for their energy. So looking to the market to be cheaper is quite difficult, particularly when we're at a point where we're outsourcing a lot of our energy. Russia's invasion of Ukraine matters in Pennsylvania. Why? As of 2016, we actually flipped all of our import terminals to be export terminals. This past year in 2022, the United States became one of the largest exporters of natural gas in the world.
That's 3 minutes, Dr. Fowler.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else in person who would like to make a comment? Please.
Hi. So I actually went to school here as a kid. If anybody runs into Mr. Fitzgerald, if you wouldn't mind, tell him that Scott Perry turned out better than he probably thought. I moved away for a while. I grew up here. I just came back after a 23-year hiatus. I spent that time working at the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm a retired lawyer there. I also was the Deputy Secretary of the Office of Oil and Gas Management. As a lawyer, I represented the Commonwealth before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as well as the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission on wholesale energy markets, transmission line siting, all things energy. And then, of course, as Deputy Secretary of Office of Oil and Gas Management, oversaw all development of the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania. And so the question is whether or not this is a fiscally prudent idea for me. And the answer is yes. To be so emphatic and certain in that assessment is to understand whether or not electricity market prices are going to go up or down in the future, and they will go up. They will go up for two reasons. One is because demand will increase. Even under conservative estimates by the PUC, which typically looks backwards, considering COVID and things like that, they're projecting 0.5% increase. But a new massive load is coming on board, and that is electric vehicles. Last year, they accounted for 4.5% of sales in the United States. By 2030, they're projected to be 30%. And if you don't believe that mass transformation in energy demand is coming, I've got compact disc players I'd like to sell you, because that's the kind of thing that's going to happen with vehicles in this country. Just a few short years ago, natural gas made up about 15% of the generation supply in Pennsylvania. It surpassed nuke, and it killed coal. It's over 52% of electricity generation is now natural gas. Dr. Fowler talked about Europe's demand for natural gas because of what Russia has done. 66% increase in LNG imports into Russia, or into Europe just last year, and they're increasing their capacity by 34% over the next 2 years. Where is the natural gas going to come from? It's going to come from here. We are the second largest natural gas producing state in the nation. I don't predict that natural gas supply is going to keep growing like it has in the past, 7.6 trillion cubic feet in 2021. The numbers that I ran just today show that they're not on pace to have the amount of natural gas produced in 2022 as they did in 2021. So you've got a massive, massive amount of electricity generation coming from one source, and that is natural gas. The solar accounts for 0.1%. So there's massive room for growth. There will be no nuclear power plants built in the state. There will be no coal-fired power plants built in the state. There will be no new hydroelectric dams built in this state. Renewable is the only place where generation will come. And that is the only way that electricity prices are going to go down. When you have a massive increase in demand, a huge amount coming from a source that will not increase in supply, and in fact, demand from Europe will drag natural gas out of this state to Europe. They want to propose an LNG export terminal in Chester County to augment Cove Point in Maryland. Putting your eggs in the market will mean you will be paying more than what this PPA is going to be asking you to pay over 15 years, by a lot.
That's 3 minutes, Mr.
Thank you.
Perry. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to make a public comment? Oh, we'll let her go first.
Thank you. I'm Janet Swim. I live over in Harris Township, and I guess for full disclosure, I've worked with Peter as well. But I work at the university, and I wanted to just reinforce the beginning of what Peter said and the context for this, and particularly for the State College School Board, that I think it's really important for students to see the school board doing something. They are more worried about climate change than other groups, particularly when you look at our college students, that's an increase. And everybody's getting more worried, but the younger generations are getting even more worried. And to be able to show something that is being done, I think is a really important thing for the school board to be thinking about. I also have worked to try and help homeowners switch over so they can buy renewable energy as well. And they usually are just surprised that they can have that choice. And having the district do that very thing is going to actually also, I think, help the community as well in their own personal decisions to make choices. So I think it's an important role model for both the community as a whole and for the students.
Thank you so much, Ms. Swim. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Franklin Egan. I have a second grader and a kindergartner in this school. And I was also very proud to get to work with Dr. Buck and Pam Adams on the climate action plan for the center region. Just as we were talking, I was running some quick numbers in my head, and Peter, I think you said that the plan would be some 11 million kilowatt hours.
If that was 80%.
If that was 80%. Just to set the context, the center region does have a climate action resolution, a science-based target for reducing the region's greenhouse gas emissions, which are in the ballpark of 825 million metric tons per year. I think this action alone would account for some 1 or 2% of that target. So certainly a very long way to go, but that's just this action is a very significant step towards what the entire region, the entire community needs to do for climate action. And I would just be very supportive. I know that my children would be very supportive and proud of this action.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Dorothy Blair, and I'm a long time retired person from Penn State. And I just want to say almost a sentence. I think this is such a moral issue. And I know that you are tasked to be fiscally conservative, but this is an issue that could blow up in our faces in ways we can't imagine, and we need to act on it. It's blowing up right now. So please consider that what you're doing is a wonderful thing for your students, but also for this whole area and the rest of the world. We need to make these decisions. And it's a very strong responsibility for you to do this. And you could look at it this way. You're probably going to make money at least for 7 years, and then you might lose money, but it's not that much compared to what could happen. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else in person who'd like to make a comment? All right, in that case, I'll check online. I see Mr. Nain's hand raised. Esther, would you like to make your comment? Oh, do I have to do something? I have to allow you to talk. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Board President Huff. I truly appreciate that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Ezra Nains, resident of the borough. I also have children in the Scasdy School District, a 5th grader and a 7th grader. I want to thank Dr. Buck and everyone at the COG for this incredible work. And I thought the board asked all the right questions. You know, I speak as a parent and as mayor, and you know, this has come before us in the borough as well. And I just want to say that the hardest part here is not knowing that this is a wonderful thing to do. It's just that the future is uncertain. It always is and always will be. There are things we just cannot know, and those are in the future. But I think, as we've heard from so many experts tonight, we have a pretty good idea of where things are going, and taking bold action, such as really moving forward with this agreement at a high percentage, you know, that is, you know, smart, is really something that we will all be proud of as parents and as public servants in a community. So I just want to lend my support to your actions. I know that if you choose to move forward with this, when you do, you will certainly have my support. And I would love to see all of our neighboring municipalities join together with you, and your size and importance will carry a lot of weight. So thank you for taking this up now. And I just wanted to say we will be with you in your choice. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. All right, I see Joan Bouchard.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, how do I turn my camera on? Well, you may not see me after all.
You are loud and clear, so if you want to go ahead with your
All
comment.
right, that's good, fine. My words are more important than what I look like anyway. So, my name is Joan Bouchard, and I live at 240 Lions Hill Road, apartment E101. That's part of the village at Penn State in Patton Township. And my goddaughter is a senior at State High. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight, because I would like to see the board set a really good example of environmental stewardship for Yvonne and for her classmates by agreeing to take part in this solar power purchase opportunity. And of course, my cell phone has just quit, but here we're back again. So I have heard many in the community say that this is the right thing to do, but now's the time to do it. And besides, as every teacher and parent and grandparent knows, kids pay much more attention to what we do than to what we say. But there's another totally different kind of reason that I would like to bring forward here, and that is there are opportunities here for internships and apprenticeship programs in the field of solar energy that are being created in Pennsylvania, even as we speak. So since our installation is going to be located, as I understand it, in Center County, or possibly in Greene County, but we're hoping for Center, I imagine, I'm hoping that students from State High and other area high schools are going to be able to go on site and explore opportunities in this really promising and growing field, even before they graduate from high school. Many of Yvonne's friends who are seniors now are not in the position to, or maybe not interested in, going to college, and they would welcome a chance to get an interesting, well-paying job with the future without having to go into debt to train for it. And finally, I think that the board's positive action tonight will spur the other authorities and municipalities to follow our lead. And in fact, I'd like to see us commit to buying as close to 100% of our electricity as we can after the board has done its due diligence in figuring out, how much is the most without wasting any money. I'd like to see it come from the solar power purchase agreement because it's best for our budget, and obviously it's best for the climate. We have goals we need to reach, and we're way behind already in what we need to do. This could kind of kickstart this whole area to start doing more things and talking about it less. But most important of all, it's the best for our kids. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I've learned a lot, and thanks for all the work that Professor Buck and all the others have done on this project. Millions of hours.
Thank you for your comments. All right, David Stone.
Yeah, you can hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is David Stone. I'm speaking tonight for the Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition. And I guess it kind of goes without saying that we support this, and I'm going to say a couple of different things than the people tonight who obviously are very well spoken. This will be a little bit more tentative, but I think it's important. There's a story here that's being built up. The example that Dr. Buck has shown, and Pam and all of the people working on this, to come to a responsible, well thought out decision that will serve as an example to other more rural areas in the state which haven't done this so far. But to make the story really have an edge that a younger person can understand, perhaps, in light of all the uncertain future that they face, it's really great to have a number like 100%. And to worry too much about some potential shortfall in the out years when you have the option of electrification of buses, and I think would be really great to get as close to 100, to go at 100%. Make it simple, set an example, and then worry about finding a way to make it work down the road. And you're fortunate because you're large enough and have options to use up any extra electricity. And I wouldn't doubt that in a situation where there was actually excess, that accommodations couldn't be made, even if under present regulatory environment, that's not possible. It'd be great if you were on the side of those adaptations. And so, appreciate it. Hope you can tell a solid story that young people and old people and everybody will understand. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment, either in person or online? Yes, Maya Dombrowski.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maya. I'm a 10th grader in the district, and it was just stated in the presentation that this is an initiative deeply supported by the youth of this district, and I just want to quickly echo that. So there isn't time for talking about clean energy and the effects of our actions on the climate not to culminate in action, and I believe that the district would be acting in a severely disadvantageous way if we bypass this opportunity to support our future. This is an opportunity that comes to the right place, to the right people, and at an urgent time. If we participate in this deal, we not only secure safe futures for the children in our schools, but we collaborate with those in our community and thus build our strengths, cover our weaknesses, and build relationships in our area. This is an opportunity for talk and symbolic support to turn into concrete action and results that will show that SCASD supports the future of its students. In the status quo, by utilizing harmful energy heavily, we are preserving a legacy of wounding our planet, and I want to see that the district supports fixing this mistake and helping to bring back life again. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other individuals interested in public comment tonight? All right, thank you for all of those. Okay, so looking ahead to future agenda planning, we have a special meeting on February 2nd, which will be for our board vacancy interviews. So we're looking forward to seeing all our applicants there. Oh, there's another public comment?
I don't see it. Okay, they're gone.
Let me just ask one more. Michaela Amato?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Please listen to our youth. Maya was extraordinarily focused in what she said, and if not now, when in the world are we going to move forward with this? Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm sorry I missed you. Thank you for coming back. Okay, so looking ahead to future agenda, I mentioned on Thursday, February 2nd, we have our board vacancy interviews. On February 6th, we will have our committee of the whole meeting, which will feature information reports from culture, climate, and learning, facilities and grounds, and finance and audit. We'll also have a few action items, including policy 122, 123, 123.1, and an election of the new board member. On February 20th, we'll have a regular meeting that will include approval of revised committee assignments, approval of bus purchase bids, policies 800.1, 123.1, 815.5, 815.6, and 815.7. In addition, there will be information reports on policies 320, 321, 709, 805.1, and 805.2, as well as attendance boundaries and facilities analysis, and a report on girls wrestling. We're really getting after those policies. All right. I would now like to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
And Ms. Huff,
yes.
may I say, and the volume commitment will be on one of those board meetings.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, because we have to do it in February.
Correct?
Correct. Okay. Thank you. All right.
So moved.
All right. I have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Could I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending.